Okay. 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 The endless loop of audio again. All right. We are back with Elder Scrolls Online. Donkey says hello. All right, this is just kind of a semi-brief overview. I went through and did a few more builds in recent months with the release of High Isle. We got some new mythics and some new sets and various things to play with, so I've been kind of experimenting with both the gear and kind of a different approach, different playstyles. So today is, or this video rather, is basically going to be me going over my latest Warden tank build. My initial versions of virtually all of the characters, I've just essentially got one for each class now because of the ability to use the armory system. There's no longer the need really to have multiple characters split out based on archetypal roles. So I just have one from each class, and then I just create different builds using the armory system, so I can switch back and forth. It makes it fairly easy. Most of the characters, just a kind of a quick review. Let's see, Imperial. I believe that she's an Imperial. In the case of the Dragon Knight at the time, for tanking purposes, I wanted something that had kind of maximum magicka capabilities, so I went with the Breton. And Nord was more of a thematic choice, to be honest. And then the Orc for the Sork. But essentially, they're when you're using the armory only to switch between different builds, you want to kind of go with a race that is either middle of the road or that will work kind of across the board for healing, for tanking, and for DPS. So, in case of the Warden, I went with Nord. And let's go ahead and get logged in, and I'll kind of run through the basics. One of the main issues that I've personally run into with tanking is trying to find a balance, typically between stamina and magicka. It's tanks have always been kind of a hybrid in that sense, where generally speaking, you definitely need stamina for most of the things like breaking free, blocking, that kind of stuff in traditional sword and board setup. But a lot of the classes also have useful skills that are based on magicka that can be used for tanking, so it's good to kind of have a balance between the two. Some classes, like Dragon Knight specifically, are heavier on magicka. I would say Necromancer as well. For the skills, there's a lot of magicka skills from a tanking perspective that can be used. So a lot of the builds in the past that I've seen and I've run are utilizing high mag recovery on the jewelry, while running sword and board as the primary. At least a lot of people will run a frost staff on the back bar, but your main blocking is going to be done with stamina. So with the release of High Isle, one of the mythic items that came out that I've been kind of playing with, and initially, especially when it first came out, before they nerfed it, one of the items was the Oaken Soul Ring. And this provides, as you can see here from the tooltip, it provides a ton of buffs. The initial release had a lot of major buffs. I think it was about 3 months after they nerfed it, so a lot of them were switched to minor buffs. But still, overall, it's actually not bad, and especially for tanking, this provides you with a lot of the buffs that typically you're trying to manage in general, but as a tank, by providing all these buffs, it helps you focus more on protecting your group and doing the tanky type things. So, and I was already running this for the DPS version of the builds anyway, so I figured, well, why not incorporate this into a tanking setup? Now, the one limitation, in case you're not familiar with the Oakensoul Ring, in exchange for getting all these buffs, essentially you're locked out of your back bar. So this is a 1-bar build for tanking, which means you are limited to 6 skill slots with your ultimate, 5 skills and an ultimate. So it's definitely easier to manage from an actual playstyle perspective, but more difficult because you have such a limited number of slots. You really have to be able to get your core tanking abilities worked into those slots. But I think with this particular build, it actually it worked itself out pretty well. So 1-bar build, ignore the maelstrom on the back. Just there from the DPS build, likely. 1-bar build, I went with leeching as far as sets. This is kind of my core tanking set on most of my tanks. I like it just because it provides a lot of survivability. I do a lot of pugging, so I need to know that I can depend on myself, especially as a tank, to survive. So this is usually my core set. And you'll notice I'm not wearing a monster helm in this case because of the 1-bar build, and I want to use Oakensoul. This gives me a little more flexibility, plus from a tanking perspective, a lot of the monster helms, they're okay, but from my experience, they don't provide a huge amount of utility to the group. Something like Magma Incarnate or something like that does a better job, but I decided to just basically do away with the head and shoulders, and that gives me the ability to throw in a piece of trainee, which in this case, this is a drop from one of the quests in the game. That's a piece of trainee, and then Oakensoul being the other side of that. So we've got 1 piece of trainee, 1 mythic, and then the rest are your 2 sets. So I've got leeching on the jewelry, and this is partially a thematic choice. I looked around for a secondary set that I could use with Warden, her being a Nord as well. I thought this was thematically fun as well as useful, so I went with Frozen Watchers for the secondary set. And essentially what this gives you is you summon a blizzard while you're bracing or blocking, which does frost damage within 6 meters to the enemies. Has a 15% chance of inflicting chilled on any enemies that are hit. Everything is in sturdy. This is actually an important part of the build. I basically am running sturdy even on the chest, all the armor pieces, and then on the jewelry everything is infused. So the leeching I transmuted into infused for the ring and the necklace, and then Oakensoul comes infused by default, and I'm doing block cost reduction on all of these. And in case you're not familiar with this set, it gives you a visual. But while you're blocking, this is the area that's doing frost damage to the enemies around you. So it helps out a little bit. Again, I like a fun factor in my builds, so this provides kind of a visual fun factor, and it's both Nord and Warden. Thematically, it kind of fits with them too, so I thought this was a cool set to run. I know there are other sets that are useful. I've tried a number of them, and some of them are useful, but this was like I said, half a thematic choice, and it's something different. The core of the kind of the idea behind the build, which I have never done before, but I'm definitely becoming more of a fan of, is this is in essence a permablock build. I did another build recently on the Sork where I had access using Dark Deal. I could exchange using Magicka, I could exchange for stamina, and so essentially it was kind of the concept of being able to block almost permanently. With the exception of the time it takes to cast Dark Deal, that was pretty much the only downtime. The rest of the time I could be blocking. So I've avoided permablock builds on my tanks for quite some time because it's a resource hog sitting there blocking ever since they changed it to where whatever resource it costs, you don't gain that resource while you're blocking. It becomes a resource management issue. So that I kind of avoided the whole idea of the concept of a permablocking build. But with the Sork specifically in Dark Deal, I realized, well, hey, if I can get something where I can cast a skill that will exchange one resource for another while blocking, in essence, I can just keep this up forever. And so with that in mind, I started looking through, and came up with, well, in this case it's spell symmetry, but it's equilibrium, I believe is the, under the Mages Guild. Equilibrium is the skill. And what this essentially does is it costs you health, and in exchange for the health, you're going to gain back Magicka. You might be thinking, well, that's not going to do you a whole lot of good. The last part of the build is I'm using an ice staff. In this case, it's infused and restores Magicka as far as the enchant, so that actually helps give you more Magicka back while you're blocking. Excuse me, but the key is underneath Destruction Staff. I've taken the Trifocus passive. I know a lot of people will avoid putting points into this specifically so they don't cost Magicka while blocking. I actually intentionally put points into this so that it does cost me Magicka. And this being a 1-bar build, that's the only weapon I have, so the only thing I can block with is the Ice Staff. So while I'm blocking, if I use a bunch of Magicka, and I'm blocking, you'll notice my mag isn't going up at all. Because your recovery in this mode while you're blocking, because it costs me Magicka, my mag recovery is 0. So I will not recover Magicka during this time. However, while I'm blocking, I can just cast Equilibrium. Now keep in mind this is an Equilibrium, Dark Deal, those kind of things, they're channels. So while you're casting this, you're technically not blocking. So the cast of this needs to be done and timed correctly based on boss attacks, that kind of thing. But you see how quickly I'm able to recover while healing. Cast a couple times and I'm back to full Magicka. So this gives me the ability to almost permablock. I mean, obviously you have a slight downtime while you're casting this, maybe while you're hitting other skills, depending on your where your finger placement is. But it's at very, very high uptime I'm blocking, which provides a massive amount of mitigation, reduction in damage. And I can just sit here and do this all day. It's not hard at all to manage. Like I said, the only thing that you really need to just be careful of or aware of is for those boss heavy attacks or things that are going to do a high damage, you don't want to be casting this because that essentially doesn't won't count as blocking. It's when you cast this, the channel basically drops block. So this is the concept I'm actually going to, I've been running through my other builds recently, taking a look at the tank builds. I really like this idea. I even am considering switching my current Dragonite build to something similar. The Oaken Soul isn't a requirement. if you want to do a front bar, back bar setup, excuse me, to allow yourself to have more skills, that's perfectly fine. This can still work perfectly fine. You can even run something where it's sword and board on a back bar, where that becomes kind of your secondary. So it gives you an alternate method for blocking should you need it. I have not found the need for that, I'll be honest. I really, really like and enjoy playing this. From the Warden's perspective, I've got a heal for myself and a group member. It's a very powerful heal and heal over time. I've got Major and Minor Breach through Deep Fissure. These are both Magicka skills, but I can keep this up, which gives me the exact same debuffs that I would be getting with the sword and board taunt. So I'm not missing out, and in fact this is hitting multiple enemies at once, so it's actually saving me time. Plus you're getting the damage that this is doing as well, plus you get the benefits from having an animal ability on your bar. I've got Frost Clench, so I no longer need to run two separate taunts. Typically I'm running the sword and board taunt as well. So normally I would run Puncture, or Pierce Armor in this case. And then I would also be running the Undaunted skill, Inner Fire, either the Beast or Rage depending on what resource I needed, in order to get a range taunt. In this case, this is the combination of both. So I no longer need, this is a 28 meter range, I no longer need two taunts, I already have a range taunt, this is how I taunt everything. And again, it costs Magicka, which I can get back very, very easily using Equilibrium, or Spell Symmetry in this case. If you're not running Oaken Soul, I would switch this to the other morph. Just because I took this morph because I already have my Major Resolve from Oaken Soul, so I don't need this. This actually helps with sustain, because it gives me reduction of cost on the next Magicka ability I use. So keep that in mind if you're switching Oaken Soul out for something else. And then the last thing I have in here is Silver Leash, which is just used to pull in mobs. And again, I don't use stamina for blocking. You do still use it for dodge rolling, you still use it for breaking free, so there is still some stamina use, but for a permablock setup, I'm saving a ton of stamina. So you've got plenty of stamina left to be able to pull in mobs using this, because it's your only stamina skill. Ultimate is up to you. I went with Enchanted Forest. With her being a Nord, I took the version that gives you more ultimate back. I do a lot of pugging, like I said, and not every group is equally capable, so this actually comes in really, really handy. It's a super cheap ultimate. It gives me the ability to provide a really big heal for the group, as well as a heal over time. And I normally get, like I said, if you're hitting someone that's low health, you're getting ultimate back, so this regenerates and comes back very, very quickly, so I'm able to use it a lot. Any number of other ultimates that you could potentially go with. Typically, I'll run Warhorn. It's a good option for the group as well. Aggressive Horn is good if you have a group that actually does decent DPS, but again, for pugging, if the DPS isn't so great or they're having issues staying alive, the Aggressive Horn really isn't, it's not nearly as useful as something like this. So I like the utility that this brings both here and here, from a healing your group and helping to keep your group alive. The other option, and it is completely optional, but I started out using Elemental Blockade here. This is another option as well. This provides shields for your group. It chills enemies. And in the case of this build, I'm running an infused Ice Staff with a Magicka enchant restore magicka. So this is going to tick and it's going to give me more magicka back. But I've switched. I've switched this out for the animal companion just because this helps bring more DPS to the group, because I'm able to provide major and minor breach across mobs. Plus you're getting, you know, whatever benefits come from. This is giving me healing once that's done casting. This is giving me ultimate. That's increasing mag and stam recovery. And armor pen. Don't really use the armor pen, but these are all decent passives to have. So, other than a CC, which again, if you're running the Wall of Elements, that gives you a CC. So I guess you could swap it out depending on whether you want more of a defensive, helping the group build, or you want more of offensive. This is an offensive choice. Wall of Elements is more of a defensive and offers the snare. So that's, with this particular setup, you don't have any type of snare, but I am able to pull them in using Silver Leash as well as taunt them. And I haven't found a huge need for it. I don't feel like it's missing in this particular setup. I guess if you don't want to leash them in, you could potentially replace Silver Leash with a different skill. Obviously, Equilibrium is core to the build in terms of the perma-blocking aspect of it. Frost Clench is core as well because you need some sort of a taunt, and this gives you a range on top of it. If you don't want to heal, well, yeah, I wouldn't recommend getting rid of this, because this gives you a heal as well as another member, so this is basically your only source of healing other than your ultimate. So it's a pretty good setup. I've been really having a lot of fun with this. Oaken Soul, I know it got nerfed, but it's still very, very decent depending on your playstyle. It's not going to be top numbers, but it does simplify things quite a bit. And as a tank, the simpler is actually a nice feature to have, because it allows me to focus on helping the group as well as just the general tanking, mobs, bosses, etc. So CP, not a whole lot here in terms of differences. It's the same as most of my tank builds. Duelist, rebuff, enduring resolve, unassailable, and then in here I've got ironclad. Those are my 4 slottables. And then, you know, take these as you can get them. I started putting points into that's stamina, this is magicka, this is healing received, I believe. Healing done. So this is pretty normal for the tanking side. I've got points into boundless vitality here. I didn't take the fortified, the armor, just because as a Nord you've got extra. So in this case, the only thing I think I did differently, I would definitely recommend underneath Walking Fortress. This is a priority. Take Bracing Anchor. For a perma-block build, this is definitely something you're going to want, as well as, if you can, put max points into this so that you're able to move while blocking more quickly. And then these two as well. This is going to help reduce cost as well as the damage you're taking while blocking. The rest of them is just, you know, cost reduction. Started doing stamina for sprinting. In this case, I took Strategic Reserve just because your main exchange is health for magicka. I figured while I'm not using my ultimate, this will give me higher health recovery. I do tend, for this build, I do tend to use my ultimate a lot, but while it's building, this is helping with your health recovery. kind of build that pool back up. So I think that's basically it. It's a simple build in pretty much every regard. You've got a single bar. The gear is pretty straightforward. 2 sets, a piece of trainee, and Oaken Soul. You definitely want an ice staff. Keep that in mind. It's the only one that'll allow you to cost magicka while blocking. As far as the configuration up here, it can be in any configuration you want. If you have a trainee helm or something like that, it can go there. This was just an easy piece to pick up at the time, so I grabbed it. And it doesn't need to be golded out either. I was using this for, I believe, a different build. So any order, they're all heavy. That's another advantage of going with Frozen Watcher. They're all heavy, so you don't have to worry about jewelry and weapons being on one side of it, because it's a medium or light set, so you have to use that down here. It's not necessary. Leeching and Frozen Watcher are both heavy, so you can put it in any configuration that works for you. Just remember cost reduction and infused on the jewelry. Ice staff, and take that Trifocus passive so that it's costing magicka. Block and exchange.
What kind of trouble do you think we can get up to here?
It's a good exchange rate. It builds back up very quickly. Oh, food. Food and Mundus, sorry. Got a lot of buffs here. So I took the Lord Mundus again, just boosting that health by that much more. I'm trying to give myself the biggest pool as possible to pull from as a tank. Obviously you don't want to get one shot, so this gives you extra health that you can pull from in order to exchange for magicka while you're blocking. Don't take something like the Atronac or because mag recovery isn't going to do you a whole lot of good. This is virtually a permablock build, so you're not going to be getting really any mag recovery. You don't have to worry about it. And I'm using Bewitched Sugar Skulls, which is pretty much my go-to food for most of my tanking builds nowadays. I suppose you could exchange the Lord for something different if you're feeling like you need to, but maybe you want more resistance, maybe you like to dodge roll a lot as a tank, maybe you want to go for something like the tower, give you more stamina. It's completely up to you. I found that the Lord was a good choice, just because it gives you that extra boost in the health, so... I think that's it. Like I said, I already have a similar Sork build. Also running Oaken Soul, using Dark Deal instead of Equilibrium. Also works very, very well. That I may do a separate video on, but the concept is generally the same. If you don't have something like a Sork with Dark Deal, you can use Equilibrium and an ice staff to accomplish the same thing. So then at that point it just comes down to which sets do you want to run, along with, you know, what can you fit onto a single bar if you're using Oaken Soul. So that's it. He doesn't even look like a tank. I haven't had anybody accuse me of fake tanking yet. Usually if I see someone that just shows up with a staff, I question. Are you a real tank? He's a real tank. The health should give it away. Another nice thing with the Warden specifically is you're getting that extra 10% health. Green balance that gives you the... Yeah, when you activate a heal on yourself or an ally, you grant the target minor toughness, which is 10% more health for 20 seconds. So the higher your health, it's a percentage-based boost. Higher the health, you're gaining more from minor toughness as well. So that's another reason why going with the Lord Mundus Stone I think is a good choice, because you're getting a percentage-based boost on a pool that's already maxed, or as maxed as you can get it. So almost 54,000 health. You got plenty to pull from and staying alive. Plus, as you're blocking, because it is mostly a perma-block build, you're not taking those big shots, or at least the full extent of the damage. That's it. We covered food, we covered Mundus, covered CP, covered skills. I generally don't really go into passives a whole lot unless it pertains specifically to the build. Kind of go through and review that as needed. I take all the passives from the class. I take all the passives from whatever weapon I'm running. Mage's Guild passes I've took just because this helps with some of your cost, which does affect spell symmetry. So if you can do things like let's see, max magic and mag recovery. Here it is. Reduces magic and health cost of your guild abilities by 15%. And obviously you need Mage's Guild for this setup, for sure, to use Equilibrium, because you've got to get that unlocked, and you want this passive. That helps reduce this cost as well. And that's it. Hope you enjoyed the build. Feel free to take it out, give it a run on your own, and enjoy.